What's up, everyone, and welcome to the Elevate Experience,
the podcast about overcoming struggles and adversity and how that relates to addiction, recovery, and health. I am your host and the CEO of Elevate Addiction Services, Angie Manson.
And I'm Dallas Terrell, co-host and life intervention counselor at Elevate. Thank you so much for joining us, and let's jump right in. Today, we are doing our very first special guest episode. You're joined by Angie Manson, Dan Manson, and myself, Dallas Terrell, and we're going to get into the program overview and kind of talk a little bit about the Elevate program. Did you guys want to introduce yourself or say anything before we get started?
Nope, I already have my intro on.
You already had it? Yeah, I kind of already did it for all of us.
Yeah.
So, well.
Welcome to the show, Dan.
Hey, thanks. Thanks for having me here.
Yeah,
Do you
glad
like being
to have
called
you.
Dan or Daniel?
You know what? I like both. I grew up Daniel.
Gotcha.
And some people used to call me Danny. I did not like that at all.
You still don't like that so much.
I know. And
I know.
I don't feel like a Danny at all. Daniel is like, people have known me for a long time, or my family. But then Dan kind of became like my business name for some reason. People just start calling me Dan.
I like that.
I started to put that, okay, Dan on my LinkedIn and whatever. So it's like, now people just know me by that. So now I can't go back really to Daniel. So
It's too late.
Yeah. So either one's fine. Just don't call me Danny.
I don't think I can ever call you Dan, though.
No, I don't think so.
So that's fine.
I know I could never call you Danny. Like, I could never say that name while looking at you and feel good about it.
Yeah.
Like, to me, Danny's kind of like a younger, like, little boy name. Like, you're trying to call over a child or a kid. I don't know. That's just kind of my experience with Danny.
When I was growing up, my next door neighbor, his name was Danny. He was my age.
Okay.
So it was Daniel and Danny. So I could never be Danny because he was Danny.
Right.
So
that was a good thing.
Yeah, exactly.
There we go. Well, we're going to stick with Dan.
Yeah.
Let's do it. All right. So, Dan, let's talk about the program. Obviously, we created the program. We love it. It's very successful. But we'd like you to talk about maybe the broader view of the program and its elements.
Sure. So, well, I talk to a lot of people about Elevate because, I talk to them about treatment and rehab, and everyone has the same kind of questions like, well, what makes you different? I say, well, we're different. Well, how? And there's a lot that goes into that, but I'll try to break it down in a way that's not too overwhelming. But I think the first thing is that the culture is very positive. And what I mean by that is that it's not a medical, clinical type environment. It's more like a retreat summer camp environment, in that everybody who works here is really happy to see you and see you get better. And we're in your corner, and we don't treat you like you have a disease and you're sick, but instead that you're going through challenges that we're familiar with, because nearly all of us have been through those ourselves. And we're just here to support you and get you through that.
Yeah, so like Dallas and I noticed that we'll hear a lot of times at graduation, clients just coming down and, starting to be around everybody else. They've said, why is everybody here so happy? Like at first
Yep.
It kind of freaks them out because they're not used to that. That's not the world they've come from. And they definitely don't associate positivity with rehab or getting better. It's usually a very somber and serious experience. So we often hear that from our clients.
Well, that's been kind of like the traditional model a little bit, like people take it very seriously. And it is serious business. Of course, it's life and death. However, the way out is not to get really, really serious and dark about it. It's actually to try to, emote as much positivity as possible.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I think you also can only live in that like emotional tone for so long. You can't just, be always in session. You can't always be talking about your past and your feelings and these things that happen. So I would agree 100% that is one of the big separators, is like the culture and the environment and the positivity and the outlook on treatment and on living life.
Right. And that's a lot of what we're trying to teach the clients here, that being sober doesn't have to be a very sad and miserable thing. You don't have to white knuckle it every day of your life just to not use or drink. And so a lot of that comes with, obviously a lot of internal work to get to that place, but also just being in an environment where it is a positive place for you to be.
Right. I mean, at the end of the day, if you're sober, but you hate your life and you hate getting up every day, I mean, what kind of life is that?
What's the point?
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we try to make sobriety, a fun experience where you're excited about life. You're passionate about what you want to do, your goals, you're sort of reinvigorated to go out there and kill it out there. And rather than the, other philosophies, which is sort of like, you have this disease, you need to manage it. It's something you need to be aware of. And I'm not saying you have to, forget about the fact that, you could go out of control, but I think the thing is that you shouldn't have that define you.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's huge. And that's one of the things, as, obviously a staff member, but a client of this program, that I resonated with the most is I don't have to be an addict. I don't have to be bound to the decisions that I was making, and I could be whoever I want to be and be kind of part of the hero of your own story. And I feel like Elevate does a great job of cultivating that for somebody, for a client, and that's, I think, that's been one of the biggest blessings for me, is I don't have to identify as a drug addict anymore, and I can just be Dallas, and that's okay.
And we love you for that.
Thanks, Ange.
We touched on
I love me
week.
for that too these days, so that feels nice too.
Yeah.
That was one of the things we touched on in our last podcast, is about, one of the core values of the staff is being hardworking and fun. And so that creates the environment around here. And then the clients see that, they emulate that, and they're like, oh, I actually enjoy this. This is a very uplifting environment. I like being this. And then they want to take it back to where, their homes are, their environments, and keep that positivity going.
Yeah, I think the other thing that's important about this culture here is it's one of like no judgment. You know, people can walk around here and they can be themselves, and they don't have to feel like they have to be ashamed of their past or hiding who they are or what they've done, because we're kind of all on the same page, and no one has to put up a false, front about who they are or anything like that. And so when people can let their guard down, and we see it with people, they come in, their guard's up, they don't know who we are. And like Angie said, it's weird. Everyone's smiling, like, what's going on? Like, where am I?
What is this?
But a couple weeks in, it is like, what's that word? Contagious or infectious, like the positivity. You just start to wake up and in a good mood, and then you see another dude who just got here, and he's kind of down, and you kind of feel like you can help him, like, because someone helped you, and that whole thing just feeds off of itself. And we have a really great environment.
Yeah. And I think maybe a misconception, if you hear us talking about the positivity around here, is that, maybe it's just shallow and they're not doing the work and it's like all fun and games. And that's actually not the case. So we actually deep dive into doing a lot of work in a lot of different ways, and confronting, awful traumas and different things that the client has done, and accountabilities. So there's a lot of hard work that goes into it. But the point is, outside of that work in life and in living, you don't have to keep living that way while you're doing the work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great segue to kind of talk more about those things that we do here. We do we do here at Elevate.
Yeah. Well, I can break down the program a little bit, and I'll just touch on a few of these things, and then we can get into them a little bit more if we want. But
yeah,
when people ask, like, well, what's Elevate? Because they're sort of familiar with sort of, usually a traditional sort of 12-step model, and I say, well, if I have like 30 seconds to explain to somebody, I say something like, well, it's a program where we've incorporated, scientifically evidence-based practices, mostly cognitive behavioral therapy and similar practices to that. And we also utilize mindfulness as a tool for people to help get control of their mind and their life and their emotions, coupled with exercise and nutrition to get people's physical health better, adding in individual and group therapy sessions, and then having a whole educational curriculum where they're being brought down a path from where they are starting to a better life. And that's not just educational as in like theoretical and like writing in a journal, although we do things like that. It's also the actual practical changes in their life, like through our interactive exercises with families, which Dallas does a lot of, like the life intervention counselor, where you actually take a family member and the client and you facilitate that relationship somehow. And, it's everyone knows they're struggling with their parents and they have a severed relationship or a strained relationship. And both sides want to make it better, but they don't know how.
Right.
And there's a lot of emotion involved and stuff like that. And so we have a very practical set of tools that says, okay, here's what we want you to do. Get on the phone with your mom and say this and start talking about that, and then see what happens. Talk about that a little bit, Dallas, as far like how the actual application of the curriculum in the real world works from your perspective.
No, absolutely. I like the way that you explained it too. Like that overview was like, hey, this is the assignment, do that with your parents, you know, and that's exactly what we do. And, you know, in the mindfulness workbook that we do use, there's a whole section on healing conversations, and the client will jot down a bunch of almost ways to flip a conversation into being like a win-win conversation. There's a letter of invitation that they write. So before we even have a conversation, they've already facilitated those ideas and intentions into their own words on paper. And so they can choose to send that letter if they want to, or we just turn that letter into a dialogue over the phone. You know, and obviously the client and myself will talk one-on-one and pinpoint some of the themes from the book and from their life that all kind of align. And so essentially how that would work is we have a conversation, we note the kind of the therapeutic value is acknowledging that we've harmed the relationship and being able to convey that I've harmed you in these ways and I want you to know that I know that and that wasn't okay. Then from there, we can talk about how to move forward. We can get the parent's perspective, and then the client finishes with giving their perspective. So it doesn't sound like this, hey mom, I really hurt your feelings. How can I fix it? And you're almost putting the responsibility to fix onto them. So we close it with them kind of opening or taking accountability with the responsibility to fix. So that's kind of how that would work in taking the curriculum, the educational component, into reality with your family.
I think that's huge because, you know, we call that step rebuilding trust, and trust has been broken on both sides. You know, the client's afraid to trust their family with the truth because you can't come back from it once it comes out of your mouth.
Totally.
And they've been keeping these secrets for so long that, you know, it's a really big step, but it's also very big for the families to have the understanding on the other side that no matter what you're being told, it is the truth, their truth, and you have to kind of like accept it and realize this is part of you guys both being able to move on.
Oh, absolutely. I usually encourage the client. I'm there. I supervise it happening, but it is ironic how often I end up on the conversation with them. You know,
kind of like the mediator.
Like, hey, yeah, if you need help, I'm right here. And oftentimes they're like, where's your counselor? I don't believe you. You know, one time I had a client's parent. He did so well communicating his true intentions and like wanting to repair the relationship. She thought he was high because he's never heard her son be that, like, you know, honest and wanting to be accountable. And I was like, no, he's not high. I'm his counselor. I'm right here. And she's like, you need to UA him, you know? I was like, okay, we will. But like, I promise, like, he means this.
She probably just couldn't believe the honesty. Like it was just so foreign to actually have that voice come out,
right?
You know, and actually be willing to address and deal with those things, which is, you know, as people who are, you know, using substances and stuff, they're running away. They're not talking about their problems. They're not confronting. I think the thing that's so different is, and you know, it's not like other programs don't involve family members in therapy or things like that, but I think at Elevate, we're bringing people through a journey together, right? Like the client may be here in treatment, but it's not like son goes to rehab and then X number of days later son is fixed and like you know pick him up. It's more like it's a process, and the family goes through the process, and you know the client has to do some of these steps to move on, and that involves the family, and so the family has to be willing to do that. But when that happens, both sides are healed, and I think that's important.
Absolutely. Well, you can't fix a person without fixing the things that they're connected to, because they're going right back to that same environment. And so if you don't heal everyone and everything around them, they're just going to go back into a toxic environment, because the family's not going to trust that this person has changed or they're different. Nothing's going to change on their end. They're like, oh, great, they were at summer camp for 2 months. Must be nice. Well, I'm back here holding the fort. Right. So there really has to be involved in the process so that they understand the work that the client is doing, but also they're doing the work alongside of them, because there's a lot of emotional healing that has to happen from the family side as well.
Absolutely. And I think that's the best part about rebuilding trust is it's in the first phase of the program. And that's kind of our first big challenge, our first big tackle of like, hey, let's get this started. You know, you have X amount of days left in treatment. Let's really kind of capitalize and start the healing now, which is my favorite part about it.
Right. Well, and you're doing it early on, so it's not like you have to fix the whole relationship in one conversation or in one exercise. It's like we're just getting started, and then I'm going to come back to you several times throughout this program, and we're going to do different things together. But it just sort of lays the groundwork that I'm ready to get open and honest with you. Are you ready with me? Let's go on through this together.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned something about going out into the real world, and you have to fix all the elements around it. Well, you can't fix the whole world, right? So you have to just prepare the person for what they're going to do. And I think the other thing that we do really well is life skills. And because we know that somebody can't be, surrounded by positive emotions or people all the time. They have they're going to go into the lion's den, for lack of a better word, and be exposed to triggers and cravings and people that may want to get them to use with them or whatever. And we got to give them skills and tools when they go out there that will help them be on the right path and make the right decisions. And by practicing those things while they're here, and by setting up realistic scenarios and all these different things, and like role playing a little bit, that also gives them a lot of practice and confidence in what's going to happen out there, rather than just sort of keeping them in a bubble, and then one day you're not in the bubble anymore, and all this stuff closes in on you.
Right.
And you're like, what do I do?
Right.
This wasn't in my book.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we start working on their exit plan from the first day they walk in the door, preparing for that outcome in every scenario.
Yeah. Yeah.
What else? What do you want to talk about next?
Let's see. I mean,
I know we talked, you were talking about education, right? I think it was awesome. It was like, it's kind of like, hey, so how, like, what are we? And I was like, this is what we are. This is how we're different. Mindfulness.
Yeah. Well, do you want to touch on mindfulness, like why that would be important?
Absolutely. And how they started, from being in the cabin all the way down, and why.
Right.
We put that as a tool, because it is a tool, and that's why we utilize it.
Yeah, we could definitely do that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the theory of mindfulness is that you are basically taking time to gather your thoughts and not react. Right. So, like, to use an example that everybody can probably relate to is you're driving in traffic and somebody cuts you off, right? And it's like, okay, well, if you're not practicing mindfulness, right, you could immediately, your blood boils, you freak out, at the very least, you're angry, personally angry, maybe like beating your steering wheel and screaming,
taking it out on the steering wheel.
Exactly. So at the very least, you're affected negatively. At worst case, you act out from that and like swerve at the car, do something crazy, right? I mean, that, that's taking it to the next level. But if you are practicing mindfulness, you can realize that something happened, that you were unable to control, but you can control how you react.
Right.
And by being able to, and whether it's, 10 seconds of breath or 30 seconds of breath or whatever it is, you're just interjecting, peace from the moment something happens to the moment you react. And that applies so much where, if you have a craving, if you're a drug addict and you have a craving for heroin or something like that, okay, well, that's something that's happening to you. You could almost, and people have said this, well, one moment I had a craving, and the next moment I was shooting up. I don't even know what happened in between. It was just like I was on automatic. So the purpose of mindfulness is to break that automatic cycle and interject, some peace and some thought into that, so that people can make a better decision.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other part about that, sorry, Dallas, don't mean to interrupt, is it also puts the person in the present, because as we've seen, when a lot of people come in, they're very much stuck in their past, what was going on, what happened to them as a child. There's like all these old tapes that are playing in their head all the time. And so the cool thing about mindfulness, and we have them start practicing mindfulness while they're still in detox, like right out of the gate, get that practice in so that it becomes the habit that they can take with them. But it really puts them in the present present moment so that they can objectively evaluate and look at things and process data correctly without looking through the lens of their past that's clouding everything that they're looking at. And by being in the moment, when things like that happen, it keeps them in the moment and they don't just react off of something.
Right. And
Absolutely.
I think it's like any skill, right? You have to practice it. It's something that doesn't come naturally. I mean, maybe to some it is a little bit more natural than others, just like some people might be more athletic than others naturally. But as you practice it and you get better at it, you can apply it to your life throughout all different kinds of situations. I mean, a lot of successful people will meditate or do mindfulness or something like that. And all they're really doing is they're just focusing their, their energy.
What's happening.
Exactly.
Of course.
Speaking of practicing exercises, maybe we should get into that, right? You two are
Practicing exercise.
you two are more better at speaking to this than me. Obviously, you're in better shape and CrossFit coaches and everything like that. But exercise and nutrition is really important part of the program, and so we all know why. Why don't you guys speak to why that would be? I know minimally it gives you self-confidence,
right,
and things like that. But, why don't you talk a little about that?
Well, I'll just talk about the very first thing and why I really wanted to put CrossFit into the program. I realized through, being a busy executive, parent, all that kind of stuff. And I started doing CrossFit and I was not athletic. I hadn't worked out a whole lot. Something I struggled with my whole life. I always wanted to be that way, but I never developed that passion or that skill. I had a heart condition, so it was very easy to say why I shouldn't be doing these things. But after I started CrossFit, the thing I loved about it is it actually forced me to be mindful. It forced me to be in the present. Like, you have to be aware of your surroundings, what's going on. There's people, there's community, there's a lot of action. And it was such a relief to be able to block out the rest of the world and just be fully in the moment of working out and working on myself. And so for me, that was like, wow, like this is the ultimate exercise in mindfulness. And we're getting strong, we're getting fit, there's a community aspect about it. But I really love that part, that when you're in there, you can't be anywhere else. And so it puts you in the moment, and by being in the moment, you just feel good.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's huge. I think that's a massive benefit, and it ties together the whole mindfulness piece too. I think another big part of it too is just the damage that we do to our bodies. It's CrossFit, in my experience, in my opinion as well, is probably the quickest way to put someone back together, combining every physical skill that exists, not exists, but the main ones that we use: agility, speed, endurance, balance, blah, 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 right? All the things that we actually use to be a functioning human being, and I'm sure we could all attest to the clients that showed up in the detox cabin that came in a walker or a cane and then left running, so oftentimes, we harm our body so much, and drugs and alcohol has a very bad effect onto our body and what we're doing. So I think the best way to correct that is by getting fit and getting healthy, and almost creating a better chance to live longer. So I think that's like the surface reason that we do it, is we want people to live longer and be happier and healthier, and you feel happier when you're healthier and you're doing good towards your body. And that kind of segues right into nutrition too, and the food that the clients eat, and giving them 3 square meals and snacks and having healthy options in a salad bar. And we really take that stuff seriously, regardless of just the community and the meditation and the mental toughness that comes from it. We could talk about exercise for 4 more hours.
Well, you mentioned mental toughness. I wanted to jump into that real quick. Because doing hard things that you don't want to do is like, hey, I'll be the first to admit, like, I don't want to jump into that CrossFit gym and do a bunch of burpees. Like, I don't. But, a lot of life and overcoming obstacles and goals is pushing yourself out of your comfort zone and doing things that you don't want to do, but you should do them. And for somebody in recovery, right, I mean, that is so important. Like, it may be really, really hard to, go to this function with your family and not drink, or whatever it is that the person's trying to overcome. But you know what? The only way you get through that is by, going through and doing hard things you don't want to do. I kind of like, the Jocko Willink and the David Goggins of rehab, which sort of like, okay, we talk about mindfulness and positive culture and all that stuff, but we're not here like, just sitting here Zen meditating. We're also like, getting in there and getting after it and pushing ourselves to become the best person that you can be. And that's your physical body, that's your relationships with your family, that's your relationship with yourself, and all those kinds of things.
Of course.
Well, and a lot of what happens when people come in, and especially when they get off drugs or alcohol and they've been on them for so long, their sleep patterns and their eating patterns are so messed up. And because we take everybody off of all their medications and things like that pretty rapidly, and they do the program without the use of those, we also had to find a way where we could quickly adjust those things so that they could fully, participate in the program without lack of sleep, without, weird eating habits. And so, a hard workout very early on will get those endorphins released and help them sleep at night, help their muscles, their bones, their nerves. Everything starts correcting themselves a whole lot faster than if they were doing nothing and they were just sitting on the couch in a dark room smoking cigarettes all day. This turbos them into a faster healing.
Yeah.
And then they start feeling good. They start getting that quick release where they feel, holy crap, I used to feel this good when I did, a shot of something. And so they start to experience that same sort of good feeling, but by doing something healthy. And then they start associating those good feelings with working out, with eating good, with all the positive things, as opposed to the things that were harming them.
Oh, of course.
It's no longer taking a pill to achieve or experience something you like. It's actually, substituting it with something healthy.
Yeah, I think one thing too I wanted to kind of highlight was with the mental toughness, but it kind of just came out organically, was like I'm always telling clients a big thing that we do here at Elevate is we take action. Like, you're coming to see me in my office, we're doing something before you leave, right? Because I want us to take action. I want us to do something tangible, and CrossFit and, rehab is a very action thing. Like, you have to do these things to change, and you can't just come here and sit down for X amount of days and expect everything to change. And so what that led me to kind of think about too with the whole mental toughness thing is becoming mentally tough is a hard thing to practice. Like, where do you experience, sad events, or where do you can't like really prepare to be mentally tough. So it's like you can almost really find it through physical toughness. Like, okay, we're gonna do a hard exercise, and that's where I challenge my mind to keep going. Other than that, it's like you can't really be like, I want my parents to die so I can get ready for how hard that's gonna feel. It's so I've found that the real deep kind of therapeutic value of CrossFit is seeing yourself get through very difficult things and being like, okay, it's possible. Maybe I can get through that trigger. Maybe I could make amends to this girl that I really hurt. Like, it's almost like empowering in, like, that's how it translates to me, I guess. That's what I'm trying to say, is connecting the two almost.
Right. Well, the other thing is that the hardest thing about exercise is starting. Right?
Oh, yeah.
Once you're on a roll, it's a lot easier to go in there once you're on a roll. Well, the same thing with recovery. Right?
Yeah, of course.
It's really hard to stop. And it's those, first week, this first, month is the hardest. But just like exercise gets easier as you work out, so does recovery. Right. So these two things dovetail really well.
Well said. Yeah, I like that. That's a good point.
Absolutely.
I was going to talk a little bit, if you guys don't mind, about the sort of the groups that we do. And a lot of groups that you do in other treatment programs is one certain way. They have there might be a 12-step meeting or something like that, which is all, fine and valid. It's been happening for a long time. But we have a little bit of a different spin on it, in that we have our group is called Team. And it's team because we wanted the group together, including the counselor, to sort of work together. I mean, we're not sitting around in a circle and saying, okay, let's all talk about how, Joe is in denial and let's rail on him for a while. And, that's not what it's about at all. It's like the entire group, the purpose of it is to work together to solve a problem. And so everyone's on the same team.
Right.
And the enemy that the team is up against, is the addiction. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I think that, and we have all these, just like we have all these different exercises that, Dallas does with the family, we have these other team, exercises that we do in these groups and these subjects that they go over. And, it might be something where they watch a 15 minutes of a TED Talk and discuss it and things like that. But every single one of these groups, these teams, has a purpose and an exercise. Right. And we've documented all this stuff. And, we had some that we did and they were really, really positive and successful. We added those to the curriculum, and, we experimented with some others and they weren't as effective, and we took those out. And so at this point, we have all these different team exercises and curriculum that has been proven over years to be something that is really impactful to our clients. And, you don't go into group thinking, oh my gosh, what are we going to talk about now? It's like, you're going to go in and it's going to be something new each time. And, you're going to go through that exercise together interactively. And the things that I hear from people about our team compared to how I hear other people talk about group is like night and day.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
A big component of it is education. It's just looking at things from different angles and then being able to process that on a group level, much like book club. We've been doing our book club. You read a chapter, you process it, you all talk about it, and you realize like you interpreted it this way, but that guy saw it from that angle, and wow, I never looked at it that way, and I never would have thought of looking at it that way if that guy hadn't said it.
Right.
So it's really neat because and every group is different, obviously different ages, different parts of the program. And so you could do the same group 15 times and you're always going to get a different result. But it's always very mind and thought provoking because everybody's take on it is different, but it gives you a lot of different perspectives on the same idea.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what people need. I think I can think of one super memorable team where, just like kind of to paint a picture or give an example where someone brought up like, hey, I'm prescribed Adderall. I don't know if I want to take it after this, even though it's a drug and I wasn't addicted to it. I was here for drinking, but like, what do you guys think as a team? What's your perspective? What is your take on me taking medication I'm prescribed by a doctor, right? So it's like super valid, and they felt obviously comfortable enough to bring something that personal up. And then you get the counselor's feedback, and you get every other client's feedback, and someone can be like, hey, I was addicted to Adderall, and it is addicting, and it could be bad because it'll hurt your stomach. You don't get to eat so much, and that might affect your CrossFit, and then you're losing weight, and then you don't feel good, and totally point something out that you wouldn't have normally seen without bringing it up. So I like, it's kind of just to, well, I guess what's the word? It's to like highlight what you said of like they're there to solve a problem together.
Yeah, it's the peer-to-peer counseling. And a lot of times it can be done anonymously. If someone's like afraid to, I was in a team where everybody wrote their thing on a paper, they threw it in a bowl, they took someone else's problem
pop.
and problem pop, and they tried to solve it in an anonymous way so that people felt more like they weren't on the spot and they could really put something out there and get an objective viewpoint, not based off of their personal personality.
Right. Well, I think what that example you just made, Dallas, about the guy who didn't know if he wanted to take Adderall or not, whether he makes that choice or not is less relevant than the fact that he is empowered to be the one to make that choice.
Right.
Because, before he felt like, okay, well, I have to do this because doctor says that. Well, a lot of doctors have a lot of different opinions,
Totally.
So I love the fact that people take back control of their life and their decisions, and maybe they want to see a different doctor, or maybe they want to, get a second opinion or whatever. And really that's what it's about. It's not about being a slave to what must be done. It's about empowering yourself to make the decisions in life that are right for you.
Yeah, and see what's out there and get that different perspective, because we're always pretty one-track mind. Like, we think the way that we think. So if we never get an outside opinion or a second opinion or someone else's opinion, it's hard to kind of step outside of yourself sometimes when we know what we know, and that always feels right.
Exactly.
So changing that is huge. Like, that's kind of what I'm trying to say right there.
Yeah.
All right. So, well, then, Daniel, since we sort of lightly touched on this, why don't you talk about why we're not the biggest fans or don't completely believe in the disease model and how that works in our program?
Yeah, look, I'm not a doctor. I'm not a PhD or anything like that. I don't know that I have the right to say, whether something is a disease or not. So I just want to put that out on the record that, like, I'm not saying something is or isn't. But I'll just say that I'm not a fan of labels. And I'm not a fan of somebody labeling something a disease, not because of the terminology, but more because of what happens to a person, right? So let's just say, for example, Dallas, I just said to you, hey man, I hate to break the news to you, but you have a disease, a rare disease, an incurable rare disease, Dallas, that you may or may not survive from. And I just want to let you know there are some things that you can do to help manage this. But I hate to tell you, bro, but you got it and you're always going to have it. There's no cure.
Damn.
what happens to you?
Thanks, doc.
Well, no, but yeah. So obviously you tell that to anybody in the world, they're going to be pretty bummed right there.
Of course. It's hard to hear.
And the thing is that it's less of what they're telling you, and it's that you believe it, right?
Yeah.
If you told me, nah, dude, I don't believe you, right? Okay, you're probably going to be unaffected.
Right.
But if you believe me, and now your whole world is rocked and you see everything through that lens, that changes how you behave.
Of course.
And your mindset. And so that's why I don't like it when people say, you know, oh, I have a disease or this and that. I mean, obviously people can use that as a crutch. They can say I'm a victim, but it's hard to, you know, and look, I get it. People are victimized by drugs. People do things they would never do if they weren't on drugs, but it's hard to tell that to the guy you just stole his car from by saying, it's not my fault. I'm an addict. It's a disease. Yeah. You know, like, so I don't buy that. Because it doesn't give enough personal responsibility. I buy the fact that, you know, using and abusing drugs can turn somebody into somebody they're not. I agree that brain chemistry is affected. I agree that there's all these things that happen. I just don't agree when you say it's a disease and then it's not my fault, then it alleviates responsibility.
Right.
To me, that's crap.
Yeah, I agree 100% with that. The responsibility piece, and it almost takes you out of the solution. Or the solutions that they suggest are very subjective, which is kind of another thing, you know, like this is what you should do. Like, you know, there's not really this clear-cut solution for this disease.
This disease that you're going to suffer from the rest of your life.
Right, yeah, it's curable. You know, talk to someone.
Yeah, look, everybody has problems in life. I mean, everybody's has a past, right? You know, somebody could have grown up really, really wealthy and you know, and stuff like that. And someone could have grown up really, really poor. Someone could have been beaten as a child. Someone could have had a perfect childhood. And you know what? You know, addiction goes across all those boundaries. And so, you know, we can justify the behavior by saying, well, I was beaten every day and I grew up in the ghetto and all this kind of stuff. And yeah, you probably have a lot better argument than someone who had, you know, grown up with a lot of means and money. But the problem is that by using those excuses, it doesn't make it any better. The way out is the same for everybody. You've got to do the work.
Of course. Yeah. Well, no, I'm glad you guys talked about that. That's huge.
Well, and I think that's why we put, you know, as part of our core purpose is to empower the individual, to let them know you are powerful. You can beat this quote unquote disease or addiction or whatever it is. You don't have to suffer the rest of your life due to your past. And there is a way out. And that's why, you know, the program is designed to empower the person and let them take back and realize that their own personal power, and to put them, you know, if they're in a terrible situation, they're not crumbling and crying and I can't handle this. They're empowered to make the right decision.
Right. And we do, you know, bringing it back to Elevate, what we do, like we do have individual therapy, right? You know, we talked about the team, we talked about all those things, some of these deep personal things, sexual abuse, you know, for, you know, usually for women, not always, but, you know, some of these, you know, or trauma, all these things, like there's a time and a place for that. Totally. And some people are brave and can even speak to some of those things at group level, but sometimes they're not. But we have individual counseling and therapists to be able to address those things one-on-one with people so that they can go through all these exercises, but those few, you know, really major milestones in their life that affected them, you know, from a trauma perspective, can be addressed and alleviated at the same time while they're building their confidence, while they're going through all these things that we've talked about. They can dive in and address some of those things too. Yeah,
absolutely. I think the cool part too about the individualized counseling is from my perspective, I get to meet with clients regarding a lot of the assignments in the program. And sometimes they bring up trauma and, you know, some heavier stuff with me. And it's cool to know that maybe a perspective that I think is helpful is landing with them, and they're also receiving another perspective or assignment or task from their one-on-one counselor. So they're getting oftentimes multiple angles of one problem. So it's nice to know that it's being addressed in multiple different ways. Which, you know, I've been in a couple different treatment centers in my life prior to coming here, and that never was the case. I had one guy to talk to about my problems and my issues, and whatever I got back from him was all that I got. For example, I had ADHD, and all I got was a ball to squeeze when I talked to him. That was it, you know? So I was like, dude, okay, cool. How about like just get over it, man? That worked for me. And ironically, it's shaking right now, but it was funny. Like, I was able to control it. No one just, the ADHD was kind of like my excuse. I can't pay attention. My dad's like, just try, man. You know?
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, and they're getting the same message from all the different parts. You know, everybody's speaking the same language, so they can't like mom and pop us either. Like go to you and say one thing, then go to their one-on-one counselor and say something else. Like everybody's uniform in the same message, which is, you know, personal accountability and responsibility. And, you know, we understand the pain and trauma, but let's work through that. And how do we work through that? We address it, we confront it, and then we figure out how to move on from it.
Of course.
I think that's why the clients relate so well to the staff, because the staff have made that journey themselves, and they know, like when they talk to them and they say like, I don't want to call my mom, like, you know, this isn't, and then they can speak to them and just, and not say from a sort of a clinical perspective, well, like, well, this is the assignment and this is there's science behind this, you know,
right.
They can say, I didn't want to call my mom either. You know, I was terrified. I did so much harm to her, you know, and she put up with me for all this stuff. But you know what? Let me tell you what happened, right? And they can have a personal experience right there. And that whole, you know, coaching perspective from a very personal level, I think is also a you know, really big part of the Elevate success.
Yeah, absolutely.
I would say it's one of the biggest thing, and it's interesting because early on, outside people would almost look at this as a black mark, like, oh, okay, so you have a bunch of former addicts running your center. Like, you know, how good could you be? But through the years, you know, I think we take pride in it now because we can relate. We're not, you know, in lab coats telling people what their problems are. It's like, I've been there. I've done that. You know, you can't pull the wool over my eyes. And, you know, I know how good you'll feel once you do this. So there's such a peer-to-peer from all of our staff to our clients. And I think that's part of the magic sauce. It's not a black mark against us. It's a very positive thing because we can relate and we understand.
Yeah. I think the best analogy for that is you can't learn how to play golf by reading a book. You know, like you can't learn how to help somebody through, I mean, I don't know, it's hard to say that, but realistically, you can't read a book about how to golf and then just go to a golf course and expect to swing and be successful and be able to help somebody. So I agree 100% that experience that most of our staff have is extremely helpful. Like, we've done this and we get it, and that's why people want to listen or want to believe you, because you have their best interests and you've been in the hot seat, as I call it. You know, I'm like, hey guys, I've been in the hot seat. I know how it feels. You can get through this. Here's an example. So that's usually what I like to say about kind of what you were saying. You know, it's, you can't learn how to golf through a book. You need to practice golf. You need to be golfing, and it kind of handles it right then and there. Yeah,
I would almost take it to the next level and go like, would you want to go to a war with a soldier who's been through 10 battles or who's only learned in the classroom how to fight a war?
Love that.
You know, because when you got your squad and they've been through stuff and they know what it's like, you know, it's a different game.
Of course.
Absolutely.
That's a heater, Dan. I like that one. Well said.
That was a good one.
Yeah. I'm going to take it the next level. We're going to talk about war.
Well, look, hey,
that's the level.
Well, I you know, not to get crazy, but it's life and death. Like,
true.
You know, look, when someone is, you know, in our program for 2 weeks and they're like, screw this, I got it, I want to leave. Like, I'm, you know, and everyone knows they're not ready. Everyone knows they're just going to want to run out and get high. We are very dedicated to stopping that person. You know, obviously we don't physically restrain them or anything, but we care because we know that could be the last time that person this could be the last day he's alive.
Yeah.
I mean, with fentanyl out there and stuff like that, it's like they could be, you know, reacting, you know, on a mindset, screw this, and they have all these other reasons. Oh, I don't like the food and the bed is lumpy, and you know, they could come up with anything they could think of. You know, the counselor, you know, is a jerk, blah, blah, blah.
My family needs me at home.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There could be any number of excuses, but at the end of the day, like the soldiers that we were just talking about, like the staff, that they get it. Like, hey, you know, you may be taking this not as seriously as you need to be, but it's serious business. Like, I'm sorry, but you have a really bad, you know, heroin problem, and you've been here for a week, dude, and you are not ready to go. And if you go, and if, you know, we can't physically stop you, but man, we're going to try everything we can otherwise, because we know this could be your last day if you go out those doors.
Absolutely. That's a great way to paint that point.
Well, and it speaks to the point too, even from the admissions counselors on the front end, they've all been through it too. So they can can speak very honestly with families and with the addicts about the severity and the life or death and why you shouldn't prolong it. And yeah, I know you have this beautiful like wedding coming up and you really want them there, but is that the greatest good for the wedding or the person? You know, this is life or death, and we have to take it that seriously.
How many stories have we heard, man, where the admissions counselors were like, hey, you got to get your kid into treatment. They're like, yeah, but his sister's wedding is next week, and then like the kid never makes it to the wedding.
Yeah.
Oh,
right.
Unfortunately, it's just, I wish it wasn't part of the game or the culture, but it absolutely is. And I think the more that we do acknowledge it, the harder we can try.
I mean, the stakes just mean, we just know the stakes are high,
right.
You know, and I think that's part of what, makes the staff passionate about their job. And, you know, they have the compassion for these people because we know that our work means something. You know, we're coming up to work every day. We're not pushing numbers on a spreadsheet so that, you know, some bank can make an extra 0.5% of money or something like that. These are people's lives in our hands and families. And every day we come up and we're changing that, you know, to anybody who will accept that help. And so the stakes are high.
Yeah. That feels good. That's what we do.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel good to go to work. I mean, I mean, you know, it's not easy. It's not easy what we do, but you know what? It's cool to talk about it and to know that we're doing something really meaningful. And I know when I talk to other people who have careers and different things, they're like, oh yeah, I sell, you know, these widgets to these companies and, you know, I make a margin on the spread. And I'm like, wow, okay. You know, hopefully he's happy or whatever, but he's not like getting into the dirt of life like we are and like, you know, working with people and really, you know, doing some meaningful stuff.
I mean, it's all about changing lives, and that's why we love graduation so much. You know, we're in there in the trenches. We're trying to help people who don't want to be helped. We're dealing with, you know, families who are upset with us for whatever reasons, and it's a hard job, and it's not cut out for everybody because you have to be there and be present and do, you know, way beyond the extra mile of a normal 9-to-5 job. But then on Friday nights, you have the client up there, and you've seen this amazing transformation in the shortest amount of time, and they're grateful and they're thankful and they're talking about all the tools and, you know, how they're going to take them into their life, and they're crying and their parents are crying and their parents are thanking you for saving their lives. And it's like, there is no better feeling on the planet than to know that you had a part in that, in really like saving this person's life.
Right.
There's nothing better I don't know of. I mean, I haven't heard of, you know, except maybe doctors that are actually saving lives, but they don't get that beautiful graduation where they have the families acknowledging them and the clients and everything else. But it is truly amazing the work that we do in the time frame that we do it in.
Well said, Ange. Well said.
But the real work is taking all that back into the world and not succumbing to the things that led them to us in the first place.
Yeah.
Very true.
And, you know, let's be honest, you know, we'd love to say our program has 100% success rate. No program does. Sometimes they go out there and they fall on their head, you know, but you know, it's always nice. You know, I know that sometimes people feel like a failure if they come back or something like that, but I'm like proud because it's like, there's a lot of options out there. There's a lot of programs, but they were like, they came back because they knew they changed, you know, and they just made some mistakes and they came back in and they got polished up. Right. And it's like, if they didn't trust us to, you know, come back in, and every time they say it, they're like, oh man, I knew when I was out there, I was thinking about Dallas, you know, and it's like, I didn't do it and I know I screwed up. And so it's nice because they believe in us and they know we're not going to judge them. You know, it's like, we'd love for everyone to get it right the first time. It's just not realistic.
Well said. Yeah, and they know we're still here for them, you know, and that's, you can learn, like you said, you can learn so much from our mistakes, and we almost have even a better battery of things to use if you do come back.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and that's part of it too, is like a lot of times when they first come here, they're not necessarily here on their own determinism. They're here because they got bottom lined by their family or the court or some catastrophe in their life is pushing them through the doors. It wasn't necessarily their choice. They agreed with it. They got a lot out of it. They did the program. But, you know, we're talking about addicts and they're kind of stubborn. So a lot of times when they come back, it's like, now I'm here for myself. Mm-hmm. You know, I went out, I tried it my way. I took what I thought was important. I left the other stuff. I fell on my face. And now I'm really here for myself. And like you said, with all the tools that we can introduce, and if they come back, they can go even deeper, and they can, keep peeling those layers of an onion.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the onion concept. That actually, it's very valid. Like, a lot of times people can only see so much in a certain amount of time. You think about it, what does an 18-year-old know about life compared to a 40-year-old? It's just an 18-year-old sees so much, and you know what? They could do the program and they could do really, really well compared to before they came in. But, maybe at age 24, like they hit another road bump that they couldn't handle, and they
Right.
went down that track again. It's not a bad thing to come back and get more help. It's just, life can be tough.
Absolutely.
Right.
Doesn't always feel good.
No. But, as their, responsibility grows, they start to see more, and they can go deeper. And a lot of times it takes falling on your face to really get to that place where you're willing to raise your responsibility and really look at things in another way.
What's funny though? The people that come back, it's like, you think about when they first walked in on day one and they were like a jerk, and they had all this crap, that they were like giving people attitude, and before they dropped all that stuff, and then and they graduated and they did well, and then if they come back again because they struggled, they come back and immediately they're better than they were before day one. Like they still, like, it's funny because it's like sometimes people look at it like black and white, like recovery's, oh well, you're sober or you're not.
Yeah.
But it's like, a lot of times they like kind of were doing pretty well in life, after the first program. And then, they came back because they had to. And usually they don't let their life go so out of control because they're smart enough, because they learned a lot. And it's not like you're either a complete failure or you're a complete success. Mm-hmm. It is a journey, and there's, degrees of success.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. That's very true. Yeah. I think we should probably start winding it down.
Yep.
We're having almost too much fun.
Yeah. It's been going.
That's the way it goes, man.
Yeah,
we just free flow. That's the way it should go.
Yeah. So I would say, in closing, we should go around the horn and say what if we had to pick one thing, what is your favorite thing about Elevate? If you can only pick one thing.
I'll start. I would just
Dang it. Oh, no. You can't take my answer.
No.
You can say it again if you want.
I'm just going to write my note here.
I'm not going to start because all the time we have these meetings.
We have these great vibes.
Where
That's
you
the
talk
problem.
about what went well for you that week, and every time I say something, Angie's like, "That was going to be what I was going to say."
Damn.
So Angie, please
go
ahead.
Absolutely not. As a guest of our show, I insist.
Okay,
go ahead.
Here we go. All right. So I was going to say,
I love this.
The number one thing I like about it, if I was to take all the different stuff, I think it's the camaraderie between the staff amongst themselves, and between the clients amongst themselves, and supporting of themselves when staff aren't even around. They have camaraderie with themselves, and then the group together of all of them combined, that camaraderie. I've never seen that anywhere.
I love that. Well said. Ange?
Nope, go ahead. Because now I got to come up with another one.
There we go.
Was it yours?
It totally was.
Oh,
of course.
Why did you let me go first?
Because
lightweight was kind of mine too.
Yeah.
But I think that just speaks to how important it is, the group and the camaraderie and the vibe and the culture that is up here. If I had to pick one other thing, I guess I would just dissect the culture a little bit and say, I would say that the way that we all have each other's back is important, and the culture that we have is, as staff members inside and outside of work, and almost like a testament to like the continuing care never has stopped, and it's still happening, and it just evolves. And I feel like, when you work here, there's people that have worked here longer than you, and they have your back, and they have experience of staying sober, and it's shared onto you, and then you share that onto the intern or the trainee or the counselor in training, and it's just this like hand-me-down of like, we have your back and we're still here to help, and there's always someone that's been through what you're going through and has gotten or has stayed sober through it. There's someone who's experienced losing a parent, or losing money, or a pandemic, or something gnarly that you wouldn't think you'd be able to get through, and there's always someone that's there to help you while you're here, and so the help never goes away. And I think that's probably the top thing for me.
Absolutely. And I sat here listening to you and agreeing with you the whole time, trying to say, okay, well, what can I say that they haven't said that wasn't what I was feeling? But it's 100% the same thing I was feeling. All I could think about is like Navy SEALs, like that brotherhood, like Jocko Willing, Extreme Ownership, like all these different David Goggins. Like there's just this brotherhood that we create up here where we have each other's back. We're going to war together. And because of that, there's just a special bond. And I can't tell you how many people have reached out to us from so long ago, like, that was the happiest time of my life. I miss you all so much. And, they've been sober for 15 years and they still hold this place as like the best time in their lives. It was free. They could like be themselves. People weren't, using each other. They didn't have to worry about, paying bills. Like it was just a very special time where they were 100% able to focus on themselves. And we were able to share that journey with them because of the team concept. And so I love it. That is my favorite part as well.
Yeah, this was their time in their life when their life changed and went in a new direction than it was going in.
Yeah, it was like their second birth.
There you go.
I almost said second something else, but it wasn't going to make sense.
But that is what's special, and we just keep it going, and we're still here, and then we have each other, and that's a big part of it too. Like we're very lucky to have each other as our staff and sharing in this experience together. Not a lot of business places or workplaces have that. So
yeah, most people don't like their coworkers. I love mine.
Totally.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
exactly. And they don't like going to work, and they don't like, they're just living for a paycheck. This is something totally different, and it's not easy. Like a lot of people, they can't hack it, or it's not cut out for it because it is really hard. But I feel like the hard work is worth it because the reward is exponential. You're never going to find another job like that.
So true.
Absolutely.
Well said. Well, thanks for being on the show with us today, Dan.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks for sharing your wisdom and talking about the program. And we were just here to kind of accent you. All right.
True or false? Am I going to get crushed in the CrossFit gym today, or can I survive?
False. Okay. You're gonna live.
We're both like watching each other like, what are you gonna say?
False, Dan. You're gonna live so much.
Yeah, you're gonna love it.
I'm going to put myself in an uncomfortable spot.
Yes.
I hate burpees, but I'm going to go do them in front of
I don't think anybody really
staff.
likes burpees.
Nobody likes burpees, but I'm going to do them because I need to do them.
There we go.
Perfect.
Lessons
I love
from
it.
Dan.